I said a lot of things because I loved him.
She said that everyone knew that the girl was a tramp and a slut, and that she deserved to die.
She banged her head against the floor and she kept yelling, "Kill her, kill her, kill her."
Looking at 18-year-old Diana Zamora and David Graham, you could place them in any 1990s sitcom. They were beautiful, ambitious, and in love. All their high school friends knew them as a happy couple with a military future. When they were arrested for unaliving Adrienne Jones in 1996, everyone was left in shock and disbelief. Perhaps authorities got their suspects mixed up, they thought. But Diana and David happily confessed that no one could stand between them. Adrienne Jones had to go. 20 years later, Diana Zamora is trying to recount her confession and prove her innocence.
I was a dumb kid. I was a dumb teenager.
Why hasn't Diana accepted responsibility after all this time? Can she fool a judge today? And what really happened that fateful night in December 1995? This is the full story of Adrienne Jones. In the early morning hours of December 3, 1995, a farmer was driving alongside a desolate country road in Texas when he saw what he thought was a body on the ground behind a barbed wire fence. He stopped his truck and went over to inspect. At first, he thought he was looking at roadkill. The face was nearly unrecognizable, but it was indeed a human body. In a state of shock, the farmer made it to a phone, where he dialed 911. Within hours, authorities identified the body as Adrienne Jones, a 16-year-old high school sophomore from the town of Mansfield, southeast of Fort Worth. Mansfield was a small town, inviting lots of young families in the 80s and 90s. In 1984, looking for a safe place to raise his family, Bill Jones moved with his wife Linda and his 3 children, Adrienne and 2 younger brothers, to Mansfield from the Dallas area. Adrienne, known as AJ to her family, was raised under pretty strict rules. Her dad, Bill, said, "I truly felt that if we had some rules to keep her away from teenage temptations, we'd be okay." Only in the fall of 1995 did he allow his daughter to stay out past 9 o'clock, and that rule was only on weekends. If she told him she was going to a movie or to Six Flags over Texas in nearby Arlington with friends, he would often make her produce a ticket stub when she came home to prove where she had been. Bill had even nailed her bedroom windows shut so she couldn't sneak out of the house at night. Adrienne thus focused on her studies and her passion for athletics. After she hurt her knee playing for the girls' soccer team, she decided to join the girls' cross-country team to get in better shape. But according to her mom, Linda, AJ was also a big flirt. When I asked her why she went to such trouble to put on her makeup before she went out of the house, she said, "Mom, you never know who you might meet." Knowing this, the detectives looked at any potential love interests that may have had a motive to take Adrienne's life, but nothing turned up. She was dating a guy named Tracy, but everything was well between them. What's more, the autopsy found no evidence that Adrienne had been SA'd. Adrienne's death, the investigators noted, was more like an execution, the result of some colossal fury. As one detective would later say, it takes a cold-blooded person to shoot a pretty young girl in the face from 2 to 4 feet away. But if this wasn't a serial predator or someone in Adrienne's proximity, who could it be? In Mansfield itself, the news of Adrienne's death had people in shock and fear. Was another teen next? High school administrators set up special rooms for students to meet with counselors. A tree was planted in memory of Adrienne next to the junior varsity soccer field, and some residents wore ribbons in her memory. But no one knew who had taken her life. People feared that law enforcement wasn't doing enough. However, detectives were slowly gathering clues, and this soon took a turn for the very strange. On the evening of December 2nd, Linda heard her daughter speaking on the phone to her boyfriend, Tracy. In the middle of the call, someone else called. Adrienne switched calls for a minute and then went back to Tracy. When she said goodnight to her boyfriend and hung up the phone, Linda asked Adrienne who the person on the second call was. She said, "Oh, that was just David from cross country. He was upset about something." 10 minutes later, Linda found Adrienne in her bedroom, looking anxious. Adrienne didn't want to talk about it, and her mom let her sleep on it, convinced she would talk about it in the morning if she wanted to. But Linda would never see her daughter again. The following morning, one of her sons asked her where Adrienne was. A few hours after Linda reported Adrienne missing, her body was found by the farmer.
Here she is, this beautiful young girl, and she's found in this really wackety place, and you don't know why. What did this young 16-year-old little girl know or do that caused you to hate her that much?
On December 4th, Linda spoke to the detectives about the David her daughter had spoken to on the phone for 1 minute before her death. Detectives then contacted the cross-country coach, and he said the only David on his team was David Graham. David Graham was 18 years old. He was described as the perfect guy. A fellow classmate said his life was so unblemished that he didn't so much as throw a spit wad in school. He had straight A's, said yes sir and yes ma'am, and had a promising career in the Navy ahead of him. He was also committed to his girlfriend, 18-year-old Diana Zamora.
I was the good child. I was the one that was supposed to go places. I never got in any kind of trouble.
Diana was known to her family as the disciplined one. Her mother called her that way because she would start studying for school before 6 o'clock each weekday morning. Her parents were proud of her. She was at the start of a promising military career, and her discipline already started to have very positive results. So when officers found David Graham and asked him if he had spoken to or seen Adrienne on December 3rd, he said, "No, why would I do that?" And that made sense to the detectives. Investigators proceeded to interview several students at Adrienne's school. One thing kept popping up. These students were all convinced that whoever had taken Adrienne's life was in her class. They were scared for their lives. And yet, Linda remained certain that it was David Graham who spoke to her daughter for 1 minute on the phone that night who was responsible. Why the minute-long phone call that late at night? And why else would Adrienne have been anxious 10 minutes later? Also, since she hadn't been snatched from her room, Adrienne had left home willingly that night. This means that she left with someone she knew. However, it would take almost a full year for David and Diana to be arrested.
It was extremely frustrating. You know, you want to know what happened and nobody is talking to you. Nobody's answering your questions.
Adrienne's parents never stopped asking law enforcement for an arrest. But while they promised their best, detectives kept making mistakes. First, they set their eyes on a female classmate of Adrienne's with a violent past. Then they arrested a boy named Brian and kept him in jail for 3 weeks, until he passed a polygraph test and convinced the detectives he had a solid alibi. The Texas Rangers and 2 separate jurisdictions had taken Adrienne's case by early 1996, and yet nothing made sense. In the summer of 1996, though, Diana Zamora joined the Naval Academy, and that was her undoing. In September of that year, Diana and David Graham were celebrating their love as if nothing had happened. David was going to be a fighter pilot and Diane a Navy soldier. A month later, Diane's Navy colleagues turned her in.
Diane let the word out to her roommates that in fact she had killed somebody. The conversation went something like this: "It looks like you and David over at the Air Force Academy really love each other." "Oh yeah, we really do." "Would you do anything for each other?" "Oh yeah." "Would you kill for David?" "Yes, and I already have."
Diane spoke about unaliving Adrienne to multiple people. She was proud of it. For her, it was proof of undying love for David. Within days, both she and David were arrested. Diane's shocked Navy Academy colleagues all took the stand against her.
She said that everyone knew that the girl was a tramp and a slut, and that she deserved to die.
Diane said Adrienne deserved to die because she had taken something of hers that she knew belonged to someone else.
Diane and David had only been dating for 2 months when David did something stupid. He was leaving the cross-country tournament in Lubbock when he offered Adrienne Jones a lift home.
He ended up in a car going home together, and instead of going straight home, David took Adrienne behind an elementary school, and apparently some clothes came off.
By the end of the night, David confessed all of this to Diane. She immediately flew off the handle.
She went nuts. She banged her head against the floor, and she kept yelling, "Kill her, kill her, kill her."
Not your usual reaction. What's worse, David took Diane seriously. He just said, "Okay, I will." After their arrest, both David and Diane wrote full confessions. In Diana's words, the plan was for David to break her neck and sink her body to the bottom of Joe Pool Lake. David also wrote, the only thing that could satisfy her womanly vengeance was the life of the one that had for an instant taken her place. At 1 a.m. on December 3rd, David picked up Adrienne from her home. Whatever he had told her on the phone hours before convinced her to go along. As soon as David drove to a remote area, Diane surprised Adrienne from behind. She was hiding behind the back seat. According to both written confessions, the couple used weights and the butt of David's firearm. In the middle of all the horror, Adrienne fled the car, but just a few feet away she collapsed. That's when David walked over to her, aimed, and fired straight into her head from point-blank range. The young couple did not shy away from describing the stomach-turning moment of Adrienne's passing. "I screamed at him, 'Kill her, kill her.' He was just so scared that he wasn't about to say no to me." David wrote that for a month after his evening with Adrienne, he was tormented by guilt and shame. The perfect and pure relationship between him and Diane, he added, had been defiled by the one girl who had stolen from us our purity. Yep, here's the motive. In Diane and David's eyes, Adrienne had taken away the purity of their relationship. Why wasn't David punished for his infidelity? Adrienne did not know he was together with someone else. David crossed the line, not Adrienne. The whole motive was outrageous to everyone, but David and Diane. With their written confessions and Diane's bragging to several Navy students, there wasn't much deliberation in their separate trials.
We, the jury, find the defendant Diane Michelle Zamora guilty of the offense of capital murder. Your punishment is hereby set at life in prison.
David Graham received the same sentence. Since they were around 19 years old at the time of their sentencing and 18 at the time of the crime, they were tried as adults. Almost 3 decades have passed since Adrienne's horrific death, and yet only one of the two seems to have accepted responsibility.
Did you pull the trigger?
No.
Did you harm Adrienne in any way?
The only thing I did was pull her hair. I remember at one time they were fighting. I had no physical part in this, even though they tried to prove I did at first. And even though I said I did in that stupid confession, I had no physical part in it, and they proved that in court.
The court did indeed show there was no evidence of Diane touching Adrienne, but she had written that she did, and the court did conclude that Diane was the mastermind behind it all.
Did you ever ask David to kill her?
No, but I did wish her dead at one point, and I think that it went from there. But of course, I wished him dead. I wished myself dead.
A bunch of shameless lies, according to the lie guy, forensic expert Stan Walters.
Can I envision and see the events in my head as it occurs? If there's something missing, that stands out more to me.
In the case of Diane's interview, several things are missing.
I had no physical part in this.
There's our surgical denial. And that's when you said you jumped that too, you caught that.
Right.
Physical part. Well, tell me about the planning part. Tell me about the conversation you and David had. How long before that night had you talked about it? Day, 2 days, 3 days? Had this been planned? Had it been running in your mind?
When Diane was asked if she witnessed David striking Adrienne, she gave the same rehearsed speech she gave in court back in 1996.
Did you see that happen?
No, but I saw his elbow come down. I didn't have my contacts in. Oh, I didn't have contacts or glasses at all.
But you were hiding in the back of the car that night. Your parents' Mazda, correct?
True, but...
Right there.
But think of the butt as a giant eraser. What I've just said, you may not believe this, but.
Stan also noted that Diane's description of the events did not match her written confession, but was identical to what she said in court.
The piece about David striking Adrienne, that same action, even where she raised her arm in your interview, it's exact same wording. To me, it sounds like it's a rehearsed segment.
Is Diane still fighting for a lighter punishment? As of late 2023, she's been in prison for 27 years. Is she still hoping to convince a judge of her innocence?
Did she cry for help?
I didn't hear her. I'm sure she did, but I didn't hear her.
How are you sure?
It's truly heartbreaking that Diane is unwilling to be accountable for Adrienne's death after all this time. She is now 45 and has spent over half of her life behind bars. In another interview, she went as far as saying that she and David were on the verge of breaking up, and David callously used Adrienne's unaliving to tie her to him. Her lies seem endless, and no wisdom is being gained with age. Both Diane and David will be eligible for parole in 2036. If they are released, they will be in their late 50s. They'll still have the good part of a life ahead of them, time that Adrienne did not get. However, with her lack of remorse, apology, or accountability, it's unlikely Diane will be released. Although this might bring an ounce of closure to Adrienne's family, it will never make up for what Diane and David did to her. Thanks for watching, you guys. Let me know what you think about this case and if you know any similar stories. And before you leave, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.